supporting people. We might wait just 2 more minutes to properly start. But on behalf of the Green Software Foundation, welcome aboard. It's exciting. We're now gathering momentum. There's, I think, around 300 people who have joined the process. There are now, I think, over 20 projects on TaiKai app at different stages of progress. And teams are forming behind the scenes, and new ideas are coming up all the time. So this feels really, really powerful. And on the other side of the screen, as it were, there is a lot of attention and interest from the sponsors, the partners, the judges at the hackathon, which means that all of these ideas that you're coming up with have the potential not just to sort of win you a prize or not win you a prize, but really influence the thinking and the practice of some of the biggest shapers of our societies, really, and our tech ecosystem. So this is a very exciting moment, and it's fantastic to have everyone here. And just to let you know what the plan is for this webinar. The last webinar was very popular, very successful. We had an opportunity to ask lots of questions, technical questions about the SDK and the API. We will have the same opportunity here. So we'll have another short demo from Vaughn's to demonstrate how the API works. And we're also really happy to have Akshit Batra, who will be there also to answer questions on the technicalities of the SDK and the API. And we will also have the opportunity to hear from 2 of the projects that have ideas by way of encouragement and stimulus. And then the focus will really be on team building, idea development, and basically helping everyone here get to the next stage. So have your questions ready about, how to interact with the API, how to interact with the SDK, but also if you're looking for an idea, then we will give you a list of lots of ideas that you might want to run with, and invite you to add your name to the ones that appeal. And that will allow us to see how people cluster. So you'll be able to go, oh, there's another 10 people or 5 people or 2 people who are interested in the same ideas as I am. And that could be the basis for you to matchmake and to build a team. So without, I think, further ado, welcome to everyone, and welcome, Vaughan, if you'd like to take us through the API for those who are coming here new. And also just to say, we will be sharing a document, frequently asked questions document, that you'll be able, that's a living document. You'll see that it's still, bits are in draft. It will continuously evolve as a result of everyone's input, but it contains some of the learning from Discord and from the last webinar. So you'll be able to refer to that as well. Welcome, Vaughan, and take it away.
So, hey, everybody. It's good to see so many people, by the way. It's very exciting for us. I'm based here in Sydney, so it's quite dark. As you can see, I've got the lights on because it's late here, but it's good to be able to participate. So I'm just going to share my screen and walk through some bits of the API, probably the bits that you're going to use most in the hackathon. Some of them are for very particular use cases. I will talk through those, but I'll demo the ones definitely that you'll be using. So let me just share my screen quickly. So this is the page that you go to if you browse to the API. So obviously we have the SDK that's available on GitHub where you can download it and you can do things. You can install the SDK itself or the API, deploy the API itself. But we actually have a live API deployed at the URL there, which you're more than welcome to use. Please, treat it kindly. It is throttled. We want to make it so it's fair for everybody. However, if you do want to do something that you think might be using it extensively or heavily, you can deploy it yourself as well, and we can sort you out with the API keys that you'll need. The Carbon Aware API is really about helping you find the best emissions by location or by time. When we talk about Carbon Aware, it's really about when and where predominantly you're running your workloads to sort of use the cleanest energy. And so the most common one people tend to be using is by location. And by location is simply you just pass in a location. At the moment, the deployed version is using Azure data center names for Microsoft Azure data centers. However, if you want to deploy your own, you can also update it to put in any data centers that you want and the data changes. We are going to have a full suite of cloud platforms, but at the moment it's just Azure data centers because that question does get asked a little bit. And so with the emissions by location API, you can give a location here. I'm giving UK South. We give a start time, so we can give a time in the past here, and say what were the emissions prior. But if we leave them blank, they just default to now. And if we execute this, we'll get back. And so if you were to run, and this gives you an example of what you can send to the API. If you were to actually run that by command line or request that URL from your language of choice, you'll come back and you can see that the data provider was the UK Energy Authority, and it's 305 grams of carbon per kilowatt hour in the UK South. Now, and that was, how much was that? 305. So if we were to look at something like, oops, I use capitals, Australia East, might also make you understand why I'm quite passionate about moving workloads. It's 781 grams of carbon per kilowatt hour. So the energy is far less cleaner where I live than it is in the UK at the moment. And so that's sort of a quick way to sort of go through and look at it. But you can also use the API to go back in time and look at things that are in the past. And so if I was to put in, say, the 4th and then execute that, I should get back data where you can see there's a couple of readings that come back. They're both the same and they're terrible. They're 910 grams of carbon per kilowatt hour it was. And so that way you're sort of getting back the data back in time, which can be really useful for understanding, hey, we run this workload at this time. It'd be good to sort of do a bit of an audit on the things that we've done in the past and to understand what the actual emissions may have been. You may also want to do a request across multiple locations. So the by locations here, I've got West US, East US, and UK South as the different locations to query. I'm just going to query it for now, just to keep it simple, but you can query it for a time. You can also query it between 2 times to get like a big array of data so that you can go through it if you need to get a lot of data back. So that will come back with multiple time intervals, but we'll just look across these 3 at the moment. So at the moment in the West US, East US, and UK South, we'll come back with the data. And so here you can see the UK was what we saw before. This is the West US because this is the data authority for the West US. And in the East US, you have 565 grams per kilowatt hour. And so here you can see that like the UK would be the South. Sorry, the UK would be the best result. UK South would be the best result. And so you'd be able to make a decision of where to deploy something or where to run your workloads, or if it's ideal for any of those locations, because maybe it's not about changing it, but maybe it's about waiting, right? Maybe it's about just waiting to run those workloads. The last one, or the next one I'm going to look at is best. So here I've got the same locations, but you might have 20 locations. And rather than go and say, hey, I want to look across all these locations at best times. You might actually have a lot of time data in here as well. And rather than trawl through it yourself, you can just add those locations. And when you execute the request, it'll come back with just the UK. Now, if you remember before, if I scroll down here to where we were before, to our results before, here you'll notice that UK is 305, and of all of these responses, and I'll zoom in a lot so that people can see it nice and big, we can see that 305 is the best of those three, and so that's why in the other API, when we go best by locations, we get only the UK. Here it is here. So yeah, so the other APIs I will talk through. Average carbon intensity is really about looking at a location at a point in time. And let's say that we just take this time format, which is just easy for me to use here. We take this time format and we just say that from October 4th at 12:30 until let's go, what are we going to do? Actually, we'll do 10:30. From 10:30 to 12:30 on October 4th, it'll take a bit of time. It might have given us an error. No, it's given us an average. There we go. So here we've got an average carbon intensity. So rather than pulling all that data back and forth and doing those calculations in your application, it's sort of storing it here and sort of making it more efficient. So you're not having to pull data back and forth, because this might be sitting in your data center. This would be sitting in a data center that'd be nice and close. So it's actually a much greener way to get averages over a longer period of time. The reason you might use the average is you might be saying, hey, I need to go and do something for a whole day. I can't change location or time once I've started. So where is the best average over that period of time? You also have things like forecasts. So you can go and forecast data in the future. So if I just get a time, I should have one here already. And let's just put it on the 11th of November. And this should work. Emission forecast, I'll put the date. Oh, hang on. I've got the dates wrong. There we go. Apologies for that. Is that working? Still not working. I haven't got the time.
We have a 72-hour limit. It might be, I think, what time? Maybe try just.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. Let's just go to, so let's go 07. Sorry, you're not going to schedule your workloads that far out. I've done something wrong here. Apologize for that. I'm not sure what I've done wrong, actually. I will respond to this in Discord, by the way. I'm just trying to figure out through to 10:50. Oh, it's because I've done it too early. So let's just do, sorry, too late. 10:35, execute. There we go. And so you'll notice that we get back a heap of data. These are the data at those points in time in the future. And so with that, you have the ability to go, okay, well, tomorrow, do I run this at this time? You can also do a broader time window as well, but we'd end up with a lot of data. And so you can understand, okay, in the future, where is the best time for me to be doing this? You don't have to just be looking back in the past. Forecast batch is different. That is about getting historical forecasts. So it might be, this is more of a hypothetical. If we went back in time, what we have looked at, because it's not looking at historical data, it's looking at the historical forecast data. So it's a little bit more of a hypothetical situation. You know, would we have reduced emissions if we'd gone back in time and if we'd had made these forecasts? An average carbon intensity batch is very similar to average carbon intensity, but a batch for lots of different locations and time boundaries. So yeah, so with that though, I think I can sort of stop. I've gone through the API and hand it back over, or if anyone's got any questions or anything that they wanted to ask from the team that maybe I've missed.
I don't see any open questions. Feel free to sort of post any more down there. Some of the questions that have come before was,
Yep.
What does the API SDK add to that compared to directly polling what time or electricity map?
Yeah, that's a good question. So at the moment, it's running what time in the background, which is one of the APIs we're looking to support. Yeah, it's UT. It should be UTC. Well, it's actually the time format is. You can actually even put the time zone in it. By the way, that's sort of a question that just popped up in chat. Going back to the what time question, because there is electricity map, resurety, and what time. And when we created the project, it was really the need to have a standardized way to interact with this API information. When you're thinking about building, you know, auto scaling or orchestration systems that can look at emissions data, you really need a standardized API, because for different locations around the world, the different data providers excel. And you know, it might be that in Asia, electricity map I know has quite strong data and a bit more coverage. I know the what time has a lot of coverage around the world. I know resurety has excellent coverage, you know, really good detail in the US. I can't speak for the rest of the world. It might be great, but because you have different data providers providing different types of granularity and different data in different parts of the world, they also have different commercial models. And so it may be beneficial for companies to swap or even combine data. And one of the things that we're looking at here is, can we even, you know, do aggregated data sources, which we're looking at doing in the future. So as soon as we support electricity map, supporting aggregated data sources is sort of the next step. So that you can say, well, if I request for data in these regions, I'll get electricity map data. If I request the data from a different region, I'll get what time data. The other thing is that they do report data in different formats. So what time does pounds per kilowatt hour, electricity map I think is grams per kilowatt hour. I can't remember what the others are, but that also gets confusing. I know it pops up, why am I getting different data from what time than I am from electricity map? And that's a common question.
Would it be correct to say that the SDK essentially translates between all of these formats and creates a standardized data format in terms of what you consume at the end? So for example, if electricity maps does grams and what time does pounds, would both be returned as grams in the JSON?
Yes, they are. Yes, so it does the conversion, which is something that we do. Another thing that we want to make sure is, for large enterprises, and we do have this is deployed in the large enterprises for time shifting machine learning workloads in not a small company, like in an international bank. And because by time shifting, they believe that they can really reduce their emissions, because they can't really move data to another country because it's a bank, but they can time shift. And but what was really important to them was to abstract the data sources where they are around the world from the applications that are making the decisions. What this means is, when you're storing and managing license keys, you're storing and managing them in the API deployment. You're not storing and managing them in every application and having to manage them that way, which means you can manage and securely manage those keys. But for example, if an organization decided, actually, there's now a free API, or there is, you know, they might have a better commercial agreement with another company, another one of the data providers, they can change that data provider without impacting any of the applications within their business. So it gives them that protection. And so that's one of the reasons why we are converting from, if it's not grams per kilowatt hour, we're converting it to grams per kilowatt hour, because that's another thing that we want to protect, you know, application developers from, is, you know, when you're building these, and you know, if you need to change data provider, and we're in a heavily evolving space around sustainability, especially around green software engineering. I suspect that a lot of these things will evolve fast, which is great, but it's not great if you're an application developer and it's impacting your application. And so what we're aiming to do here is hide that from the developer. And when those do change, you know, those data providers are people that we are working with, so we'll be well ahead of those changes, because they want to make sure that you can continue to use their API.
So then, just to summarize, what the SDK offers is essentially scalability, future-proofing, and options. It means that versus if you just commit to one API, then if that API changes, or if it's too expensive, or if a new one that you need happens, this will save a lot of trouble, and it will allow you to standardize things as well, which sort of also has sort of systemic effects, because you create
and a big part of it is that centralized control, so that things like auditability and understanding, you know, emissions are going to become heavily regulated in every country around the world. We know that this is something that's going to be happening. It's already happening in some countries. If you need to report on your emissions, then you need to make sure that you trust the data that's being reported. And if you're saying, hey, we reduced our emissions by this much by choosing a different energy source, you need to be able to sort of, you know, do that with a surety within a business, especially a business such as a bank or a large manufacturing company. And so there's a very key part of that is by centralizing it, it also gives you a lot of control and auditability, which is important.
The other question that was mentioned a few times, and you touched on it, is about the locations. So my understanding is, at the moment, the vocabulary you're using, like UK South, etc., is coming from a JSON file, which has a list of all the kind of Azure zones in the repository. If you are polling the WhatTime API, could you put a coordinate instead of UK South?
Yes. So you can do geolocations through the WhatTime API. The reason why we don't do geolocations is usually the reason why you're doing geolocations is you're referring to a named location. You're not sort of saying this location randomly in a place. You know, the aim to support geolocations, you know, long term is there, but it's really important for us is like the main decision making that we're seeing within the businesses that we've been talking to and the people that we've been talking to is ensuring that you have the ability to change that list as well. So you have the ability to change that list. At the moment, we have the Azure data centers. And the Azure data centers is a great starting place, right? And it's where we're doing a lot of the testing when we're starting out. But we want to make sure we have data centers for everything. But if you want to come along and have your own locations that map to geolocations, you know, you can add those to the data sources as well. That's something that you can do within the SDK.
But at the moment, in order to actually pull the API, if you wanted to look for zones that are not one of the Azure zones, would you need to add them on the back end to the JSON files? Would you need to create your own JSON file for new locations?
Yes. You would have to update them at the moment. And if people need to do that and need guidance on doing it, they can let us know. We're also looking at, this isn't in the SDK at the moment, but just to let you know, we're also looking at, you know, how easy would it be to add them alongside? So you can have GCP, Azure, your own personal data files with geolocations alongside as well. The importance of that flexibility, right, is because we don't want it to be an all or nothing. It's like your file or no other file, or it's Azure data centers and nothing else. We want to make sure that people have, it's as flexible and as agnostic as possible for people if they want to use it.
Fantastic. There are two questions. One is, are there opportunities available to look out for in the Carbon Aware SDK? And will we support more data providers in the future? And I think both of them come together. The answer is that it's already up there. So for example, if there's someone who is wanting to use AWS Zone, so they're going to create their own list. I think there might even already be one, but the idea is if you add another list, that could be part of your contribution in this hackathon. So
absolutely.
I want to add it and then just make a pull request.
Absolutely.
Right?
So I'm working with some teams at the moment that are thinking about what is like a really clever way to solve this from a complexity perspective. But if people like have the data files or create the data files and they want to add them, part of their contribution through the hackathon might be actually to contribute those files, or it might be something they do as part of their project. But you might say at the end of the project, hey, we've actually got this. We'd be happy to contribute it. And we're more than welcome to, and more than open to having that conversation. I think in that sense, to your point, like don't think that any contribution is too small, right? There's a lot of companies involved in the GSF, but on a relative scale, we're still a small team, and every little bit really helps. And it might be the starting point of getting involved even more as well if people want to get involved in the future.
And that's a very important point that one just made, that sometimes you want to just think of really big solutions, but actually sometimes a very small solution that can be used by lots and lots of people can have an even bigger impact. So if you spend a bit of time adding zones for, for example, electricity grids that don't have to do with cloud provision, they have to do with your internet connected washing machine. So you can program when the washing machine runs. Then you could just add that document into the repository, and that becomes an extra resource that could be added. So whether it be small or big, feel free to contribute. It is open source.
Yeah. If we think about like the project is open source, we're looking for contributions. There's a lot of things that we want to do that are on our list. You might have great ideas, and we may totally want to do them, and we might even say, that's great, we're going to add it to the backlog. Can you help us with these other things? It's not because we don't want to do that idea. It's just because we know that there's some things that we need to solve, or some features that we need to implement. But it doesn't mean that we're not interested in your ideas. And I think what we've found is, carbon aware compute, as I said, we're a small group, and so our perspectives are not as broad as they can be. And the more minds and the more diverse experience and perspectives that we get on the project, it will mean that it'll be truly solving a sustainability issue, right? Versus solving part of a sustainability issue. Like, we really want to make it address the whole issue, and it can only do that with lots of contributors. So, as I said, don't think that your idea is too small. We're open to entertaining everything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fawn.
No problem.
And along these lines, I wanted to just because this is really your event and your process and your hackathon, to invite two of the people who have come up with some of the ideas to share those ideas, to give you a sense of the kind of the range. And I believe both of them are open to having team members. So you can potentially reach out to them directly and offer your help. But first, let me welcome Yusuf Raji, who has come up with a really interesting idea called Zero Carb. It is ambitious, it is powerful, it is necessary. So Yusuf, welcome aboard.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. First of all, just where are you joining us from right now?
Oh, I'm joining from Malaysia,
Fantastic.
from a city called Cyberjaya. It's about 20 minutes from the city center. Yeah.
That's great. And how did you hear about the hackathon?
Earlier this year, I joined another hackathon on Taikai.
Aha,
So I met another software developer who I've been in touch with ever since, and he always share links to other hackathons, and the earlier ones are crypto related. So I
aha.
saw this is a little bit something I'm interested in. So I actually checked it out. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's great. And then you came up with this idea of zero carb. First of all, how did you arrive at, actually, no, maybe tell us first, what is the idea? If you want, you can just read what you wrote or just put it in your own words, but what is the basic goal of zero carb?
So zero carb, the whole idea is to provide some kind of data so that organizations or teams have visibility towards the contribution, the emission contribution of the softwares they use. And this I believe will help with maybe data-driven decision making. Or on another hand, it might help with reporting. For example, if you have targets within teams and you set a benchmark and you say, okay, can we maybe reduce by monthly by maybe 2%, for example. And on a team level or individual level, individuals can decide, for example, how they use certain softwares, and you can kind of push for reduction from there. As long as you have a benchmark, you've measured, and you can set a monthly target or a quarterly target. And yeah, that's just my
Fantastic.
thought.
And as long as and as far as I can see from your project page, your vision is to essentially allow every machine in an organization to be to report on its consumption. So you'd be kind of plugging in your proposed project. Your idea is to measure how every machine in a team or an organization is generating emissions, so to measure the software carbon intensity, which is a measure of the Green Software Foundation, of every machine in a team and organization. Is that correct?
Exactly. And you can aggregate the data by team, by department, or look at the overall organization as a whole. Depends on how you like to see it. And that's for every software on every machine. So if we use browsers like Chrome, Firefox, or other browsers, we'll be able to see, okay, Firefox maybe, or Microsoft Word is the major contributor to our organization or our team's software carbon emission. And I don't know what managers might want to do with that information, but having that is one step, in my opinion, to really understanding what's going on. Yeah, and you can make
And actually, I
decisions
can tell
based
you
on
an
those data.
example straight away where someone made a comparison of the carbon emissions of Google Meet, Zoom, Teams, etc. And immediately in the comments on LinkedIn, someone said, "Oh, well, that makes our decision of software much easier." So you can see how what you're saying would work that way. And can I ask, where does the SDK, the Carbon Aware API, fit into this?
Okay, so I believe, especially post-pandemic, we have teams. Some organizations have teams spread out across the world. Although my idea can't really fully utilize the location shifting solution, but we can have for example, since we can gather data based on different locations, each machine will report its own location, and with that location, I get the relevant data that's relevant to that machine, and we use that to actually compute the software carbon intensity. So that's where the SDK comes in. The SDK comes
That's
in,
really
pulling the data. Yeah,
that's fantastic, because also at the moment we mostly calculate the emissions on an average basis, whereas the approach that you're suggesting would also allow you to say, at this hour, this has been running on renewables. So there's been very little emissions compared to at this hour, and your actual totals would not be, well, we've been running for 20 hours and the average is X. You'd be able to say, actually, no, we know exactly how many emissions we have done at different times in our computers.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Yusuf.
Although,
that's a fantastic idea. Yeah.
Although I wouldn't
Carry
like
on.
to go into hypotheticals, but it could also be a situation where teams can make their own decision of maybe shifting the time at which they operate based on looking at this data. They might decide, well, maybe we should, rather than working at this hour, we might want to shift our operation hour to this hour, because I can't expect, it's not like the cloud where you can just run the job at a different time, but maybe with such data, teams can make better decisions to do their own reduction.
That is fantastic. That's a really, I think it has just so much potential. Thank you so much, Yusuf, for sharing your idea. The last question I have for you is, are you open for more teams members? Would you like help from others? What kind of, like, if people are hearing your idea and they'd like to get involved, would you like them to reach out to you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Anyone who's interested in solving this problem, and you might or might not have low-level programming, because right now I'm having some difficulties interfacing with the kernel to gather CPU processes and all that. And if anyone has experience with that, I would love to see how we can work together. Also, I need some support with time series databases, because this is a time series based workflow. And yeah, looking forward to learning more from others here.
Fantastic. So my suggestion would be and that goes for everyone, make sure your project has it's open in the positions, and keep the positions vague so people can directly submit them. But we will, in any case, you can reach Yusuf on Discord. You can find him directly on Taikai, and if his project sort of toggles the open positions, you can also kind of reach out to him there. So thank you very much, Yusuf. I'm going to briefly bring Samuel as well to share his idea. Your idea is all on the kind of machine side, on the back end. Vaughan has shared a lot of ideas on the cloud side of things. And Samuel has some ideas on the front ends and the design side of things. So thank you, Yusuf, and welcome, Samuel.
Hey, everyone. Hey, Ismael. Thanks for the invite to the panel.
It's great to have you. Where are you joining us from?
Joining from Slovakia, Europe.
Fantastic. So yes, could you explain what your idea is? What is the concept? It is called Sustainable UI in Taikai. What does that mean?
Of course. So I prepared some notes, introduced some structure into my speech. So first of all, the concept behind the project is very simple. Its core, its nature is really simple. It's basically a web UI library built with sustainability concepts in mind, namely on the top of the green wall design principles that I discovered on your blog, Ismael, some time ago. In short, there are two main concepts in the green wall design principles that the library is going to address. And so the first of them is graceful degradation. This means offering alternative versions of the fully blown components in the UI that are lighter when comparing to today's defaults. And lighter meaning that they have the same functionality and purpose, but execute with lower complexity. To illustrate this, you can imagine choosing audio-only mode for a video component on YouTube, which you also mentioned in our blog, Ismael. And in terms of this principle, the objective would be to design these alternative versions of components and provide implementations that can be used with ease. And library will leverage intelligence from the Carbon Aware API by the Green Software Foundation to choose the right display mode at the given time. This will result in choosing the most appropriate version of the components for a given grid intensity. And the second concept out of the two is user control and freedom. And how I would like to address this with the library is to provide a sort of edit mode to allow customization of intelligently chosen carbon aware display mode for each component individually. So that would be it about the concept in short. And
fantastic. So then maybe just to summarize it, if I understand it correctly, at the moment when people build websites, they can either kind of design every form, every icon, every navigation bar themselves, or more often kind of you plug into a library. It could be Bootstrap or Material UI or whatever, somewhere where you just go, give me a button, and then you use the button, or give me a form and you use their template, and that kind of saves you time. And it's the now all of these libraries tend to focus on the kind of highest performance possible, like the most flashy, attractive performance. And what you are suggesting, if I understand correctly, is to basically provide lower resolution alternatives. So you could have one super colorful, bright form that is your normal default, but when the electricity is very dirty, you could then still have the form, but it would now be black and white, or it would be simpler, or it would be, you know, whatever it is, it would be less intense. And your idea would be to create these components already wired so that people don't have to do the work of sort of thinking about how to adapt it. They just plug in your components and it automatically can switch from the kind of normal Material UI or the normal Bootstrap to the climate-friendly Bootstrap, climate-friendly Material UI, and people can kind of toggle it if they want. Would that be a good summary of what you've just described?
Exactly the thing I would like to implement.
So I think
exactly what
carry on.
I underscore this, what you have just said in my motivation behind the concept, which is that developers nowadays are used to implementing just a single version of the website or application, which may potentially be also the heaviest one. These UIs are by no means carbon aware, as they render in the same way at any given time, no matter the grid carbon intensity. And this UI library will try to introduce, try to reduce the effort that is associated with creating such UIs with graceful degradation options that adjust with ease based on the current grid carbon intensity to lower greenhouse gas emissions produced by client browsers. And I believe wide and quick adoption of this UI library itself and concepts it follows may significantly lower the emissions of today's web UIs, but also improve the user experience by delivering less when it's appropriate, while not sacrificing on the usability of apps.
That is fantastic. And I have to say, I agree. And I think these are two really good examples of the range of approaches you can take. So Yusuf's idea is, in a sense, very wide-ranging and ambitious, right? He's tracking electricity, he's tracking software, he's tracking times, he's tracking location, and it gives you something incredibly powerful. And Samuel's idea is very niche. It's much, much narrower. It's like, I'm going to create a form. I'm going to create a button. But it's also really scalable because you're taking that complexity out of the equation. So a lot of developers might go, I can't sell to my boss doing the time to build 2 components in order to release. But I can, if it takes the same effort to have only dirty or a dirty and clean version, and it makes no extra effort to my, and it doesn't change the style, then actually my boss will say, that's great, because not only are we carbon aware, but we can kind of market. So this is a really good example of something that can be small, relatively speaking, or very focused, but that can be hugely scalable because it's very easily adoptable. So those 2 principles are there. In the interest of time, I'm going to stop there with this idea, but thank you so much. Last question for you as well. Would you welcome, if anyone likes your idea, wants to support it, would you welcome extra members into your team?
Of course, for now, it's just me with potentially another 2 developers that focus on front-end web development. But however, I'm open to UI UX designer specialists. Mostly, as you can see, this project is very front-end related and requires some further investigation in this area, how to design certain things. So mostly these positions are free. I'll make sure to list them on Taikai network.
Fantastic. So even if you're not a developer, or if you're a front-end developer, but you'd really like to develop your UX side of things, it's a fantastic opportunity to just concentrate your attention on how to make the UX and the UI of this sort of experience work really well, whilst others work on the code, or vice versa. So thank you so much, Samuel, for your inspiration and for the courage to share it at an early stage. And now, in the last 10 minutes, we have 20 people here at the moment on call, and we know that we have many more that couldn't make it at this particular time, but we'll be watching. We have people on Taikai and on Discord, and we thought, how can we facilitate 2 potential needs? There might be people who really want to participate in the hackathon, but they haven't yet got an idea. They got skills, but they just don't know, what do I do with them? I know I want to do something. I know I can code. I know I can do graphic design. I know I can market. I know I can do a good pitch, but what shall I do? So we've come up with a whole list of ideas, which you can consider like writing prompts. They're not that this is what we want people to do. It's more, these are some ideas that could get your mental juices going. And the second need is, I'm ready, I'm keen, but I don't have a team. I'd like to meet others who are in, or I have a skill, but I'm missing others. So we brought the 2 together. And the way we brought these 2 things together is by creating a document, which is an ideas document. So we've got a whole bunch of project ideas. And what we'd like to invite you to do now is we're going to Doha, if you could screen share the document, we'll post a link in the, what is the best way to post the link? Let me see, can I message all the attendees in the chat?
Yeah, you can.
I can, okay.
Yeah.
Great. So would you, Doha, please post a link in the chat to everyone. So if everyone goes to the chat, you will have the link to this document. And in this document, what you see is a whole list of themes and examples of those themes. And what we're going to give the last few minutes to is for you to go to that document and look through the ideas. If you like any of those ideas, then add a comment. So if you can see on the right, there are all of those comments that say, if you'd like to work on this, leave your Taikai name or Discord handle. So we're not encouraging people to put in their email addresses unless they want to, but that means that, you know, you don't know where that email address goes. But if you put your Discord handle or your Taikai name, then people can find each other on Discord or on Taikai and say, ha, we all agreed with this. So say that you wanted to add a comment to the Carbon Aware software. I wonder, Doha, whether you could just show what you do to add a comment.
Yeah. You can just add. You guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, we
So-
can hear.
And if you cannot see those comments, if they're not visible to you, how do you find the comment bar and the replies?
Sorry, is that a question to me?
Sure, yes, I just, if you could demonstrate it, it's in tools, isn't it?
Yeah.
And in review suggested
So-
edit, or is it not? No.
Actually, not sure. I'm not sure, but you can see
Oh,
the
it's
comments
there,
right
it's
here
there,
on the right
sorry.
side.
And also right on the top, next to this, next to the Google camera, there is that one. That's it. So if you press there, you will see all of the comments. There's a similar interface on your mobile you can find. So basically, go to the comments, find the comment for your for the idea, and add your name if you are interested.
Just
Please
quickly,
go on.
Doha, can you share the link in chat? Someone's just
Yeah, I accidentally sent it only to
Yep,
panelists.
awesome.
There
Thank
you
you.
go.
Sorry, where oh, there it is, sorry.
So everyone's on now. I
Yeah.
don't see it.
And I'm also, someone asked it in Q&A. So the link is now both in the answered questions and in the chat. So if you click on that link now, you have 6 minutes, you know, to obviously you can carry on, but let's just grab this moment to look through those questions and comment. If you have any questions as you read them, please please ask them in the Q&A or in the chat. I'm going to click on them too. So I'll discuss, I'll just sort of quickly mention some of them. And again, these are examples of ways of thinking. So if this inspires you for something else, then sort of go for it. Now, some of them could be really huge. For example, you might want to create an actually internet-connected washing machine that only does the washing when the energy is clean. But an alternative suggestion would be just an alarm, right? If you got an alarm that you could say, these are all the jobs I only want to do when it's clean, then your app could simply be a notifier and scheduler, something that tells you green energy at these hours. This is when it's best for you to do whatever it is that you want to do at this time, boil the kettle, watch Netflix, anything that's energy intensive. And maybe, for example, you could have a list of such energy intensive activities. So that's something super simple. Other things are obviously more complicated. Some of them are controversial. So for instance, Web3 mining, if you're doing Bitcoin, if you're environmentally engaged, should you be engaged with Web3 at all or with mining? That's a debate to have. But the whole purpose of carbon awareness is that it's saying, if you're going to use energy anyway, make sure it's the greenest it can be. So if you can, if people are going to be mining anyway, how can we ensure that they mine only in the kind of greenest time possible, as it were. And yes, Maya's asked whether you can add ideas. Please add ideas. Any of your ideas that you think could fit, whether within that particular heading, like Carbon Aware software, or in your own heading, just add them in.
I'm going to share all the links that have been mentioned here, and I encourage everyone, if you haven't registered for the hackathon, register for it. There's the link, you'll see here. If you have registered on the Google form, you will get an invite to the Taikai platform, which is where you create your project there, publish it, put an ad up if you're looking for a teammate specifically, so everyone can find you as well. Join our Discord channels. That's where you can communicate directly with the SDK team, with everyone involved in the hackathon, ask your questions there as well, and also find teams. Other than that, keep filling up the project idea document, and we can connect you as well with the right people. If you've got other questions regarding the hackathon itself, email us on carbonhack22@greensoftwarefoundation. And lastly, we have the kickoff event next week on the 13th, which is where, we'll kick off the 3 weeks hackathon. So an invite will be sent out to everyone that is registered, to everyone that's joined the call today. There will also be a recording available after this call, after this webinar. So hope to see you guys on the platform, on Taikai platform, with a lot of great projects.
And those links at the top of the document, you can see that there is an FAQ. So we have gathered a lot of the questions that have been asked on Discord here elsewhere. We've also will add questions that have been asked on this webinar. It's a living document. So that's a really good place to keep referring to if you have any questions. And there are people from the Green Software team and volunteers on Discord that you can also query if you have any questions. There is a brain market place where you can sort of team build as well, and you can reach out individually to the people that you see on this document. So yes, call to action, fill in this document. You can use this document with people you know locally. You can say, hey, people, does anyone like to work on any of these ideas? So it doesn't have to be just with people here. You can form your teams in your own place. Use it, and we are about to take off. So it'd be amazing if you have the courage to act. The last point I want to leave you with is that the earliest, it's finished. Dang it.
Okay, continue.
Oh, sorry, it's still alive. I don't know, my screen seemed to have disappeared. So we are still live.
We can hear you, yeah.
Okay, apologies, everyone. My screen just went as if it had been logged out. Yes, I was going to say, make sure if you have an idea that you posted it. You can change your mind, you can change it, you can modify it, but don't leave it in draft, because the earlier you post it, the more support you will get. So we're still refining what the numbers are, but we will be offering the first X number of projects the opportunity of professional help designing their logos, and the opportunity of professional help creating pitch videos. So depending on the total numbers, this might not be available to everyone, but the earliest you make your project live, the more likely it is that you'll be able to tap into any extra support, and also the volunteers, the mentors, etc., will know you exist and be able to reach out and say, hey, can we help? These are some other resources you might think of. So if there are any more questions that you have right now that are burning, please ask them. I'll wait a few seconds. And if not, then carry on filling out this document, join Taikai, join Discord, and let's change the world together. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much to our presenters. Thank you, Vaughan, for the time you gave and the expertise and the clear answers. Thank you, Doha, for orchestrating all of this. And do not hesitate to reach out to any of us with absolutely any question, idea, or suggestion.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers.